evening, and St. Miguel, with whom we were involved at prayer this morning. So let us recall that we are in the presence of God and His saints. The founder prayed this reality in these words: "You are with me as you are with the saints in heaven. And although I understand and taste this happiness only insofar as it is possible by faith, still I look on it as being so great that I am habitually in adoration before you in spirit and heart to testify my gratitude. This constitutes the happiness of the angels and saints, and though they enjoy it in a different manner, it is you, O my God, who are the object of their contentment as happiness, as of that which I now feel within me while I think of you. Accept, I beseech you, O my God, the thoughts and sentiments which I hold towards you and your holy presence as an act of thanksgiving for the grace you grant me of thinking here of you and of your presence, since it is an action which I may offer as being most agreeable to you." St. Miguel,
pray for us.
All the holy brothers,
Pray for us.
St. John Baptist de La Salle,
Pray for us.
with Jesus in our hearts.
Forever.
Okay, without further ado, let's take a trip. What is this? Who's debating our board?
Oh, gee, wow, gee, I'm going to shoot.
I think Frank put that up.
You're in the one. That's the Hotel de la Cloche. It's a familiar picture, I'm sure, to you. It now serves as the provincialate for the district of Reims. And in addition to the house here, of course, the founder had another, the family had there's another annex to it to the left of this, that's not visible from the photo, on the other side of this entry door here. And then there's a nice garden in the back, which we shall see. At one time, this was open. This street was closed at this point at one time. There was kind of a wall coming this way. Now it's an open street. Okay. There's the famous stairway that you often see in the back. That has since been redone and rehabilitated. What's the word I'm trying to look for? Restored, and it's much nicer looking now than it was at that time. I went through this with Arose, and Arose is cute. He says, "Now we'll get down the stairs," and he says, "Here we are with little John Baptist de La Salle, 9 years old. Now see how he goes around the stern and see how he goes around the and we're living the whole thing. Okay? Now, if you're at beginnings, you'll know that originally behind the house there was a kind of a car path, a cow path. And so it got to be known as the Ruelle, which means little street, d'Odor. You know what odor is, and you know what cows produces. Now, of course, they didn't have interior plumbing in those days either. Huh? So this would have been the little alleyway behind the house where, that's where the De La Salle family had their outhouse. The day we happened to go along there, that gate was open, and Rose got ecstatic. He said, "This has never been opened before. Oh, we got to get a picture of the little Ruelle, of Little Shit Street, you might call it." Sorry about that. Well, anyway, there it is. So that's the human side. There was a brother who at one time tried to argue that this house, known as the Le Berger, was the house where the founder lives. You can see it's considered, it dates from about that time. You can see the wealthy town mansions that the wealthy bourgeoisie had, and this is facing right on out onto the corn market.
but Rose successfully disproved that too from an awful lot of evidence within. It now serves as a museum for the city of Reims. Okay. These are the vineyards, and this is Gruyere. De La Salle's grandfather was the lord of this entire area here. Little town down below, all of that property belonged to him, and these vineyards still produce grapes, and they make champagne out of it. Rose brought me to the house of the man who owns the vineyard and got a bottle of champagne, which I took with me and saved as long as I could. I still have the label someplace, of champagne made from the grapes that are descendants of the grapes that the founder knew. Okay? There's a couple of these slides are slides from that series that Gus had last night, that big red box. I took a picture of this house. They won't let you in. This was the manor house of the Gruyere family, but it's so decrepit now, it's a danger that it's falling apart, and so they won't let you in it. But the one I took was overexposed, so this is a better picture to give you an idea of the main manor house in which the founder's grandfather lived, Jean Moet de Bruy. Okay. This is the village chapel. The grandfather would have had a special banque de seigneur up in the front, which has since disappeared, but this is much the way it was in the founder's time. This is where he undoubtedly went to church with the grandfather when he was visiting him, and possibly where he taught him to say the office. Now, Rose, of course, is a marvelous guy that he comes tripping up to the altar, and he lifts up the carpet this is the carpet coming down from the altar steps, and he says, that little square there, he said, Jean Moet was so attached to Bruy that he wanted his heart to be buried here. He said, I often wondered where the heart was. And he says, I found it, because a little mark there indicating that it's the heart of Jean Moet. So that's where the grandfather's heart is. The rest of them they brought back into Reims to be buried in the cemetery of St. Hilary. That's part of the original entrance to the Collège des Beaux-Enfants. At least that stone up above, and it's not, you'd have to have a darker room and see it more closely, but it still says Collegium Bonum Puerorum in Latin, which of course is the College of the Beaux-Enfants. But that's not actually the door they entered in. Next. This was the gate where the students entered, and there's two angels here. One's laughing and one's frowning. And of course, these are the little cherubs laughing when they come into school, or frowning when they come out of school, or the other way around, perhaps. Now, this is the site when the founder was 15 years old. As you remember, he moved, the father moved the family to the corner of the Rue Saint Marguerite. And this is the site. The house has completely disappeared. This is a kind of a station for an apartment house that's behind here. The house where he had the brothers at first, or the school teachers, would have been across the street there. But just to give you an idea of how it's located, if you stand here at this corner and look towards the cathedral, here's what you see. He's standing right here. If the founder looked out his window, that's the view he'd get of the Reims Cathedral with the rear, the apse and the flying buttresses at the back. They can see how close everything was there. Okay. Wow. There's the Reims Cathedral, and I was very lucky to catch that one day when I was there. It was in the afternoon in the sun, or when the western setting sun just hits it, something the way it hits the chapel out here. The whole thing was illuminated. It was very badly damaged during World War I. Suffered tremendous damage. They've restored it all. All of these outside statues and so on are replacements. The originals were very badly weather-beaten, first of all, and war damaged. So they have them in the museum, which is in what used to be the Archbishop's Palace. Marvelous cathedral. I guess it's my favorite, at least as far as the facade is concerned. There's the famous smiling angel. In those doors, they have several of these angels and saints and things, and Reims is famous for its smiling angel. I hope all the angels are smiling when I get to meet them someday. This is a presumption. This was a special gate for the canons. This is at the side of the cathedral. This is the side door of the cathedral here, and the canons had this whole territory for themselves. They had their meeting rooms here. They had offices here, and here's where they would assemble for solemn processions before they went into the side door of the church to join the archbishop or whatever functionary was functioning. If you look, there's on the other side of it, it indicates this. This is the stall. The founder, we know, had stall number 21 as a canon, and of course he had it until they designed the thing. The actual wooden stalls are not the original ones that were there in the founder's lifetime, but all the numbers are in the same place. And Rose showed me that one time when we were out there together, but I didn't get a picture of it. So I went back on another occasion to take the picture. Almost got arrested because I had to climb over several barriers to get in there, and 2 or 3 guards and things came after me, but I escaped. And that's not too well focused. It's not the fault of it's the fault of the photographer. But that's the stained glass window in the rosette. If John Baptist de La Salle broke modestly the eyes and looked to the right as he was saying the office, that's what he'd see. That's the outside of this is where the professors live in the School of Theology. And Daniel Egan's room, who was one of his theology professors, was right up here. Okay. Now we go to St. Sulpice. This is the outside of the church. The old church had been destroyed, and it was just being rebuilt. The only part of it that was there when the founder was there is the Lady Chapel in the back, which you can still visit and get into a very Lasallian mood. Where all those famous French bishops are in this monument, Bossuet, Fenelon, I forget who they all are. And it was in this area someplace where the seminary was located in the founder's time. It's all disappeared since then. Okay? And so the seminary was probably somewhere in this area here, in that square in front of the church. There's the chapel of the Sorbonne. It's not a chapel any longer at the present, but Cardinal Richelieu is buried in there. His tomb is in there, and the day I was there for that one, again, I had a sort of breakthrough. They were preparing an art exhibit, and I think I have a picture of Richelieu's tomb, which is where the altar used to be, but I haven't got it here. Well, the founder's parents died, and he went back to Reims, and as part of the executor of his will, he had charge of some of the estates. And this is the estate at Gueux, G-U-E-U-X, a rather large thing, and the family got revenues from some of this. To take that picture, I'm standing on the 18th tee of a golf course. Go ahead. Now there you get an idea of, this was the Archbishop's palace, L'Atelier, of course, and this was the Archbishop's chapel, and then there's the cathedral to the other side. You can see the 2 towers and so on. And this, of course, is where the founder was ordained. There's the altar of the Archbishop's chapel, and they've kept it. It's a museum today. You can see the rope here. But that is the altar at which the founder would have been ordained for what? What did he get in Reims? He would have been tonsured there. He was ordained there. And subdeacon, I think, did he get? No, subdeacon he had to go. Minor orders. Okay. In the museum, they have these displays. Almost got arrested taking this one, too. And this paten is identified as belonging to John Baptist de La Salle. It was probably given to him as an ordination present by his family. And gold cruets. They're identified as having belonged to John Baptist de La Salle. He said his first Mass in the Lady Chapel. You can see how small it is. And that's very, very modest ceremony for his first Mass on Easter Sunday in 1678. And there's the statue of the founder that was put in there in 1951 by the French brothers to commemorate the 300th anniversary of his birth. You can see the typical European benches there. Okay? Now we go to Rouen. That's the Rouen Cathedral, because we have to get up to Father Barret territory, because the founder now is an ordained priest and he's about to meet a certain Adrien Niel, who came from Rouen. There's the Cathedral of Rouen, okay? And this, look way up at the top, it's not dark enough to see it, but around that, see that oval in the very top in the center? There's PN there, Ponce Maillefert, okay? And so this was where the Mailleferts lived. And see, Ponce himself, or maybe it's Madame Maillefer, but I think it's a he. And Ponce came out to wonder who was that character out there taking a picture of this house, and why. Okay. Now this is the Church of the Minims, kind of run down. If you look here close enough, you can see it says Rue des Minimes, Minims Street. Okay? And there's Father Barret himself going up there. He happened along just as I was taking the picture. That's the front of the Church of the Minims in Rouen. You'll see it if you look at the map I gave you yesterday, you'll see it. This is the door of the Sisters' Chapel. This is the famous door where Adrien Niel and Jean-Baptiste de La Salle, not knowing each other, were both trying to get in at the same time. And it's the mother house now of the Sisters of the Infant Jesus and Reed. And if you go inside, it was at Christmas time, and there's the picture of De La Salle as the founder, and Nicholas Roland, the two founders of the Sisters. Okay. Oh, I should have built this up. Remember I told you about the box they open up, and there's the head of Nicholas Roland. It's his Decimus. Taken from a death mask, huh? So they wouldn't have any trouble about him, even the cute little mustache. This is the Church of St. Maurice. This is where the first school was opened. And the school was probably in this building right here on the side of the church. So that's the first Christian school of Adrien Niel, with Jean-Baptiste de La Salle. This is the Church of St. Jacques. And the school building would have been here, probably in this corner. Obviously, it's disappeared. But the church is still there, and the founder spent a lot of time probably praying there. He certainly went to and this is the parish where he went to teach school, going across town in the habit. This is, he moves out of his mansion into the Rue Neuve. The building that he moved into would have been right here. Remember when we looked at the map, we had that little gap in between? That's been there ever since. And then little by little, he acquired more and more buildings, and that association in Reims, by the time they were finished, had this whole triangular piece of property on the Rue Neuve and the Rue de Contreil. Okay, and the Rue de Contreil, we still have a school operating there. This was built mostly with American money at the time of the second century thing in 1880. Now this is the Basilica of St. Remy. This is where we had the sacristan lock him up all night long. So you see, this itself is a rather imposing thing, way over on the southern end of the city. And attached to it, of course, was a big Benedictine monastic foundation. And there's the tomb of St. Remy. See this big, enormous thing, and it would have been here probably that the founder did all his prayer. Otherwise, it's Roman, and it's very bare. There's not an awful lot of decoration there. Just to do a little name dropping as we go through to tie it all together, this is the entrance to the property of the Duke of Mazarin up in Rethel. And this is Laon. This is the cathedral in Laon. And of course, all these cathedrals had gargoyles. But the people in Laon, and Laon is up on top of a big hill already, so you can see this for miles around coming at it. But the people in Laon were particularly grateful. If you wonder how they ever built those things that high, how did they get all those stones and things up there? They had these bulls that they brought the things up, huh? And so the people decided to honor the bulls, and so they've got bulls sticking out of all the corners of the cathedral. It's funny, the way in almost every European cathedral, they do something cute, to inject a human element into the worship of the divine. Okay. And there's, see, Rue des Frères, and there's one of them.
I think I
It was in
can.
an earlier incarnation. And there is the brother who took me around, Law, and that's the monument to Père Marquette. Remember, he was a relative of the founder. Now this is the shrine of Our Lady of Liesse after they made their first vows, and this was kind of the Lourdes of its day in France, and so it's not terribly imposing, but it's still a center of devotion. And there's the tympanum. They come in joy, and they apparenter laetitia adducenter in. They are led into the temple, and they are bearing their gifts in joy. And notice the fleur de lis, okay, the royal family. And there's the interior of the sanctuary. One of those black virgins, they're very common, these statues of Our Lady that are all blackened somehow or other. They're all over France, actually. Now, if you look to the left to see the stained glass window, there's the stained glass window put there in 1934 to commemorate what they thought was the 200th anniversary of the first General Assembly, which they presumed was in 1684. So in 1984, 1934, the 250th anniversary of the first assembly. As I said, in 1986, we decided that 86 was the year. This is the entrance. So from Reims, the founder, after everything gets settled, he goes to Paris. And he goes to the parish of Saint-Sulpice. This is the modern church, and what was left of the ancient church was incorporated into the Lady Chapel, which is right behind here, and that would have been there in the founder's time. If you go immediately to the right as you enter Saint-Sulpice there, let's go, there's an enormous, there's a rather large chapel devoted to Saint Jean-Baptiste de La Salle. And somewhere along the line in showing these slides, I lost the slide that I had of the inscription that's here. But the inscription is an inscription in French which says, this is Saint Jean-Baptiste de La Salle, who lived in this parish as a model seminarian and who established three schools, gratuitous schools, for the education of youth in the Rue Princesse, the Rue de Bac, and the Rue Placide. And this is the Rue Princesse, and this is the building. Right. It's all shops down beneath here and so on, but this was the building of the Rue Princesse where the founder first took over the school from Campagnon. There's another picture of it, trying to get an angle of it. I wanted that previous one to get to the corner with the identification. A little better idea. So a couple of the brothers have been able to get in there and go through the rooms, but they haven't been able. That's a 19th century painting of the monks at Vaugirard. And here's what Vaugirard looks like today.
Oh, dear.
Here's the site of Vaugirard. And it's now a boutique du confort, which is quite a difference from the description we get in Blanc anyway. And I presume that the snow and the wind and the rain do not come through those apartment windows up above. Okay. There's another, see how tall that apartment thing is there. That's Vaugirard today. See Rue de Vaugirard. And that's the location. This is the Rue Placide. This is where the first vandalism took place. It was located here on this corner. And it's right down the street from there is Rue de Sèvres. This is Rue de Sèvres. Rue Saint-Placide, Rue de Sèvres. Okay? This is where the Grand Maison was. This is the Rue de Vaugirard, and the Grand Maison was located right here. Nothing left of it, of course. They have since widened all these boulevards in Paris and so on. And so I'm sure if the ghost of Sister St. Fiacre ever came back, she wouldn't know where the hell she was. She may still be flitting around someplace underneath the pavement there. It's hard to tell. All right. This is Chartres, where Bishop Godet de Marais is there. All of the, again, fantastic Gothic cathedral. What a wonderful cathedral this is to visit. I can't take time to say any more about it. This is the Archbishop's Palace, which is now again a museum. Of course, all these things were confiscated during the Revolution. So this is where Godet de Marais would have received de La Salle on several occasions, where he kept him prisoner for dinner on one occasion, okay? And that's the chapel in there where the founder might quite possibly have said Mass and visiting the bishop, although they didn't come celebrate in those days. Now this is the site of the Bastille. Here's where the Bastille was. Right to the left here is where we have the School of the Franc Bourgeois. And this monument commemorates the fall of the Bastille on that site. And the Faubourg Saint-Antoine is just beyond in this direction. And this street that comes in here is the Rue, the Boulevard du Faubourg Saint-Antoine. Okay. This is Darnétal. This is the church, which was there with the founder, and the pastor who brought him up there, what was his name? Is Hay. And this is the location where the school was. It's now abandoned, because it's not the same building. The outside Rouen. This is a gratuitous school. Now this brother, what's his name? Oh damn, I forget his name all the time. Something Amel or something like that. He took me all over. He was in the French resistance during the war and everything like that. He went to our school in Rouen. He joined the brothers. He taught in the school. He became the director of the school and so on. And now he spends part of his time taking people around and guided tours. And otherwise, 3 times a week, he commutes down to Paris to do catechetical work. And this is a gratuitous school for poor children. It's not on the site where the school was at that time, but it's in Darnétal, and in a certain sense, it's the successor of that school. It's an elementary school, very modest appointments inside, wooden floors and all that. They're kind of creepy, and little kids running around, boys and girls together and so on. And the monks leading very simple lives here, still doing the same work. Okay, and there's the Hôpital. There's the hospice from which De La Salle, from which Adrien Niel came, and then that's where the brothers lived, and that's where they had to take care of all of those poor people morning, noon, and night, and so on and so forth. But this is where he got a foothold in Rouen itself. It's now some kind of they use it to help for doctors and nurses. There's a cafeteria and things in there. No admittance signs all over the place, which never bothered this man one bit. So we can't go in there. He said, oh, what do you mean we can't go in there? This is Lasallian territory. And so we move all around, and then people start pursuing us and wondering who we were, what we were doing. And we always managed to escape just in time. Wonder I didn't wind up in jail with this trip. This is the Saint-Maclou, where the first of the schools was opened outside the Hôpital. And this leads into the cemetery area, which then became the school. Okay, go ahead. And there, see, all the decorations, you can't see them too well, but they're all skulls and crossbones and things. And the founder himself probably taught school here when he substituted for some of the brothers, who, remember, they were all getting sick and so on and so forth. And there's one of his disciples down below, and the founder looking out of the window up there. There's, right in the corner, since this was being used as a cemetery, there's still, they have it enclosed in glass. They got the cornerstone, and they took the outer covering off of the damn thing. And apparently in those days it was the custom to bury a cat in the cornerstone. Huh? And so as the cat suffocated, the cat got frozen in the most violent kind of, yeah, like this. And so for all eternity, there's that cat, you know. But of course the idea was to scare away the evil spirits. It's now used as a school for fine arts. Okay. Now this is the famous statue of the founder that was put together by subscription, and this is in front of the property of St. Jan. The property is a triangular-shaped property. This would be the base of the triangle, and of course those buildings are relatively modern, and it belongs to the state, and they're not too anxious to let you in there. Interesting story about that statue. Originally, it was in the main square. It was put up in the main square in Rouen in 1888 for the beatification. I can never remember how to pronounce the Folguer, is it, Gus? What's the name?
So.
Is that correct? And he designed the statue, and it's all in bronze. It used to be in the main square of the town. But when the brothers in the anti-clerical movement in 1904, the people said, we don't want this priest in the middle of our town. We're finished with all of that. Let's get rid of him. So they were going to destroy the statue, but so
the partisans of the brothers said, oh, no, you can't do that to John Baptist de La Salle. So let's put him in a less prominent place, put him on the other side of the river, in front of St. John, where he spent so much of his time. So the city fathers agreed to, okay, as long as he's not the first thing people see when they come into Rouen. And it was fortunate because where it had been standing was absolutely level to the ground during World War II. Towards the end of the war, the Germans were running short of ammunition and everything, so they finally gave orders to go all through France, all through occupied France, and find any statues that they could that were made of bronze or any materials that could be useful for the war effort, and destroy them. So they came to this one, and the Nazis got the local people, they erected scaffolding and everything. So when the word got around what they were about to do, the people said, you can't take him away from us. They said, we got orders from the, you know. So they said, well, we'll see about orders. So they brought them their meals every day. So they put soap in their soup and so on and so forth. And then they got an awful attack with the runs and everything else. And so they kept getting delays and delays. And the Nazis were wondering, what's happening to that statue in Rouen? And so it was just about, they were just about ready to make the final effort when the Allies came along and the statue was saved. Okay. This is the Rue de Barroulière. During the famine of 1709, previous to that, the founder had bought this for the brothers in the Rue Princesse to be a better home with the garden and all that sort of stuff. But here's where he had to bring the novices during the time of famine, and they stayed there until 1715, until he brought them back to St. John again. And all that Paris did for the 300th anniversary of the birth of the founder, instead of, they changed the name from the Rue de la Barroulière to the Rue Saint-Jean-Baptiste de La Salle. So they named this little street, and it's right directly opposite the Brothers Center at Rue de Sèvres. Okay, this is the Carmelite convent where the founder went every once in a while for a prolonged retreat where old Chetardy thought he was out of town and tried to take over the institute. This is also, of course, where Blessed Solomon was imprisoned during the French Revolution and where he was martyred. And in the back, you can go to a garden there. I have slides of all of that. They're not in this set. When they came up out of the cellar and they shot them all dead, there's a big, that stairway, that balcony is kind of still there, and it says, here's where they fell. Okay? Now this is the Rue de Bac. And so this is where the school was, right on the corner here. And see, it's right next to the Royal Bridge, Le Pont Royal. And so the founder got out of bed one morning to make an early trip across to Saint Honoré on the other side of the Seine. Okay, so let's follow him across the bridge, the Pont Royal, see, which was built in 1689. This is probably 1707, and with his arthritic knee and everything else. Okay, but of course it was pitch dark at that time. And right here would be the gate where the gate to the Tuileries was, and he fell and stumbled onto an underground spike there, and he had to crawl across. Okay, let's go across. And he went past. Now the Eiffel Tower wasn't there, and they wouldn't have looked at that statue, but it's all part of the garden. And he finally wound up at St. Roch. And fell into the arms of her brother, exhausted and unconscious. Okay. Now this is the Cathedral of St. Denis, one of the earliest French Gothics. Marvelous example. Look at all the fine buttresses and so on. Okay. This is the facade. See, it's only got one tower. Chartres has two, and the second one is a late one. The simple one on the right is the one that everybody thinks is the best tower in Chartres. I should have pointed that out before. Okay. And that's where he gets into trouble. All right, now we got through that one on time. Now let's go south. Okay. And we arrive in Lyon. There's three of them there lined up. Okay. And we go from Lyon to Avignon. Let's go to Avignon first. It's still a walled city. The walls of the papal city of Avignon are still almost perfectly intact. Okay. There's the papal palace. That's the palace of the popes. The cardinals didn't like to live there. They thought it was too gloomy, so they all had their places across the street. Okay. And there's the banquet hall of the Papal Palace. It's being restored to its original. They could accommodate 1,000 people in here at one sitting. And on the other side of this is a great big enormous kitchen with a vent up and so on and so forth, and they trot in with with all their fancy things. You know why why is the main meal called an entree? A lot of people think, why don't we call the appetizer the entree?
Because they carried it in? From
Yes, and in these big banquets, when the main course was about to be served, they'd have music by Jean-Baptiste Lully, perhaps, or some one of those, or who's the one who did the masterpiece theater music, Moraga, and so then all of the waiters would come in and they'd have these big trays with stuffed birds and stuffed animals and everything, and it was a grand entrance with the main course, so that's why it's called the entree. Oh, you learn everything, all sorts of things in this. This is a little small chapel in the Papal Palace, and those frescoes date from the 14th century when the popes actually lived there. Okay? I don't have slides here of the papal rooms where the Pope lives, but there isn't a sign of any religious decoration on those walls at all. The frescoes are all birds and animals and fishes and dancing girls. This is the famous Pont d'Avignon. Here's the Rhone River, and here's where the cardinals all had their houses across the street. Philip and also Philip the Fair had one too. He was the one who brought sponsored all those French cardinals. There's the site of the original school where the brothers were in 1703. Okay, and right near the Archbishop's place. That tower is the Church of St. Augustine. It's all that's left of the church, but that's the church where the founder said Mass when he was in Avignon. And the printer that printed all the original editions out of Avignon, it was nice to do it in Avignon because you got the papal approval on the imprimaturs and all that stuff. And so the printer is still in existence, Auvergne. Now this is Marseille. This is a kind of an overview of the whole Horseshoe Harbor, taken from up above. That's the new harbor over here. Here's the horseshoe thing right here. All these yachts from the Mediterranean, I guess there must have been about 500 yachts there, maybe more, berthed. Oh. There's the Church of Saint Laurent, where we had the school in Marseille. Right, you'll see how close it is to the water. See, there it is, and here's going out, took a little trip across to the D, and there's the St. Lawrence Church. And there's Notre Dame de la Garde. The founder took his novices up there on pilgrimages from time to time. When I was up there, they were having a confirmation ceremony, and they had a tape recording of Handel's Messiah, the Alleluia chorus of all things. And these excursion boats go out, so I took one of those to get some of these views. That's the cathedral. It's the new cathedral, known as the Major. There were four. Now this is all today's stuff we're into now. So we'll talk about it in the next hour. But there were four major divisions in the city: the Yacul, St. Martin, I forget the other one, and the cathedral parish, which was called Mayor or Major. This is a statue still today of Bishop Belsunce, who did so much for the city. This is the new cathedral. There was a different one there in the founder's time, part of which exists. Next. And this is the old cathedral, and this is what the founder would have known. Okay? And this is the Archbishop's Palace. It's now the headquarters for the police. Even today in Marseille, when they say, well, where's your Uncle Harry? They'll say, Uncle Harry is down with the Archbishop, which means he's in jail. So the founder would have gone up here to visit the bishop on any number of occasions, and on one occasion he went to say goodbye to him because he was departing from Rome. Next slide, please. And when he came out of the door, there would be the ship right down the street. This is, if you stood at the doorway to the bishop's house, there's the port right there. And of course it didn't get very far. The bishop said, oh no, we got to try and get you into a new school. And so that's when he cracked the only joke in his life, when he came home to the brothers and said, here I am back from Rome. This is what's left of the church of the parish of the Yacul, Notre Dame des Yacul. And Poutet thinks that it was the pastor of that parish that began to turn the attitude of the people in Marseille against the founder and the founder's way of trying to run the schools. Had very little to do with Jansenism, probably. So discouraged and blaming only himself, the founder decided, well, he'd better get out of town, and here's where he experiences the dark night of the soul. This is a balm. A balm are these kind of chalk cliffs. They surround Marseille all over. And this one was known as the Santa Balm. They pronounced that final E, by the way, with their southern accent. Santa Balm, they say. And up there, right there, that's on a black spot, that's where, was the center of pilgrimage. According to legend, that's where Mary Magdalene came to make penance for her sins. And over the centuries, popes and bishops and kings and everything else have made pilgrimages there, and that's where De La Salle spent those couple of months. Okay, and there's the brother Jean-Paul Castel, I think his name was, the director of the community in St. Bruno in Marseille, who was taking me around it. So we decided to go up there. Takes about 45 minutes or an hour to climb up there. It was my younger days. There we are climbing up through this very foresty stuff. There's what it looks like as you're approaching it. That's a slide, I believe. It's not my own. And then when you finally get up to the top of the thing, almost exhausted, there you get into this, which is now a shrine. And that's what it looks like. Here's where those first pictures were taken from, down here, so you get some idea. You see these bones all around. So you see how high up you are. Okay. Now, can you go back a couple, Mike, please? Yeah. There. One of the questions is, did the founders spend the 40 days up here in this retreat? Well, some of the authors think that no, he stayed down in the monastery of St. Maximin, down on the valley floor. So it's disputed, but whether he was up here or down there. Didn't change his underwear for 40 days, one of the biographers said. Well, anyway, it could well have been up here because there is a Dominican monastery here, and that was there at that time. It's not awfully large, but it would be possible for a pilgrim to come there and to stay for a retreat time. So it's perfectly possible that he was up here all that time. Okay, this makes a better story if he wasn't. So this is inside. This is inside the big cave. Huh? Now you can see there's a sizable altar there and so on. I thought he was a Dominican lay brother. Turns out he was the resident priest who was mopping the floor, getting ready to say Mass about half an hour later. Okay? And there's a plaque on the wall that says what's there. Overcome by all sorts of trials and persecuted by the Jansenists for his attachment to the Roman faith, St. John Baptist de La Salle, founder of the Brothers of the Christian Schools, organizing of teaching for the people in France, proclaimed the patron of Christian teachers on the 15th of May 1950, came in 1713 to gather his forces together at the Santa Balm and in a long retreat of 40 days to recover his strength for the service of God and youth. And there's Mary Magdalene on the rocks. Brochure de la Pénitence, all right? It's a statue from the 18th century. Now, down below, in the monastery of St. Maximin, a very large monastery, really, this is the shrine of Mary Magdalene, and this reliquary behind here supposedly has Mary Magdalene's skull. Now, it's possible she did get over there, by the way, that the route from Palestine across to Marseille would have been possible for Lazarus and Mary and Martha, maybe to escape persecution or something, to come over this far. And some of the documentary evidence for this, or the evidence of a cult, goes back as early as 200 AD. So you're getting pretty back to the source. Anyway, in that reliquary, there's supposedly the skull of Mary Magdalene. Now the problem is, something like St. Luke, there's another skull someplace else, which of course is no problem because one was the skull of Mary Magdalene as a young woman and the other is skull of Mary Magdalene. Go ahead. This is Les Vans, V-A-N-S, sometimes spelled V-E-N-T-S, Les Vans, and this is where the brother school was. This is where the Huguenots physically attacked them. There was a big riot there on one occasion. Probably not as big as Blanc says it was, or as Blanc might have had. But at any rate, they were easily attacked here, right dead in the middle of the city. There's another picture of it.
Is that the actual building?
It's the actual building. Okay? And this is Gravière. Now, here's where you can see a little bit of what the territory is like in the Gévaudan. This was my guide, Brother Robert Comte, the theologian in Saint Etienne over there, and he was a very fine guy. And this is the Volkswagen we were driving around in, and this is outside the, I don't think that's it. This is the church, and there you can get an idea of, here we are down in this sort of gully, huh? But to get here, we had to come all the way down, zigzagging the road down here, and then go all the way up at the other side, and we had to do that about 4 or 5 times, and so did the founder when he would be going on this route. This Gravière is right next to Les Vents. The founder went there because this was the priest who sponsored the school and made the first negotiations, and so he stayed with him for a couple of days. Okay, and this is the actual church where the founder would have been, and it was Ascension Thursday that day. And so they were saying Mass, having Mass, okay. And it's in the sacristy where this famous portrait is of the founder, supposedly in secular dress, which of course Brother Augustine explained that last night. And on the side wall is this famous painting of the founder saying his first Mass, surrounded by Roland and all of his family. Of course, this wouldn't stand up under historical investigation. Now we're coming into Mende. Now see, here we are on top of one of these this big plateau, and we're coming down into the city. Here's where the present Brother School is, where? Here. And here's the cathedral that was very badly damaged in the fighting with the Huguenots. Okay. All right. There's the site of the first school in Avignon in 1707, set up by Bishop Piencourt. That's the front of it. And that's the back of it. It's the original building. Okay? You can go inside. That's the house of Mademoiselle Lescure, where the founder stayed with her for 2 months after he got thrown out of the brother's house, and after the Capuchins, he stayed with the Capuchins for a week, and she rescued him, and she was trying to get an organization of ladies together. Notice that they couldn't think of founding a religious order, but they wanted to lead a life according to rule, and so he helped her in between lunch and dinner sometime, when they were, of course, it gets cynical about this, arose, and some of them will insist, well, she had a house big enough, and she had an adjacent house, and that's where the founder stayed. They weren't under the same roof. And said, well, today we don't really care too much about that. Okay. Now, when she tries to persuade him to stay, and she's willing to set up him for the rest of his life in the schools, and the founder is in all of this business. He's trying to make up his mind at this time, whether to stay hidden, to stay in the South, what to do, and so on. But no, he decides after Timothy's visit that the brothers really want him at least back in Grenoble, so he has to go back again. So there, see, there's the plateau up there. Here we are down here in Mende, and so she gives him her horse. And here's the route he would have had to take up. Now, of course, he came in there by foot, and this is his second visit probably, and so it gives you a very good idea of the type of terrain that he had to travel down there in the south. And of course, it was tough enough getting up there with the car. Then at this point, the road converges into where this cross that would have been there in the founder's time. This is a little brother who was guiding me around. I've had some correspondence with him every once in a while since then. In one of the letters, De La Salle refers to the little brother from Mende, and I was happy to find that he is still living. Okay. And now we are in Grenoble, and this is the Church of Saint Andre, where Yves de Salion and Claude Canel were canons of the chapter there. Okay, and remember this is the Isère River, to give you an idea of the mountains around Grenoble, and the brother's house is right behind, the brother's house and school is right in the block behind this riverfront section. And there's the building. Plaque above says John Baptiste de La Salle taught school there. That was not the school, however. That was the brother's house. and all very concrete and so on. There's a very wild dog in the older thing, and Leo Burkhardt was taking me around Grenoble here for this trip. Go ahead. And so this is looking up to the upper levels and so on with these balconies coming out. So I didn't want to argue with the dog, but fortunately he was behind the thing. Now this is a little hole in the wall that they talk about all the time. Burkhardt told me that they have an awful lot of trouble with tramps and so on going up there and using it, and so it isn't clean. It wasn't clean when we were there. There is a cleaned up picture taken of this thing that's in the Brothers set, but this is the way it was when I was there. And supposedly there's where the founder slept. But there's a kind of a room, and it's not so terribly small, but it's very difficult to get to. In that Brothers set, there's a picture of the very, very narrow stairway going up. It really is an anchorite place inside this house. But on the other hand, if you looked out the window, that was the view we had, which isn't bad. Certainly got plenty of fresh air, though. No window in that thing. Now, this is the Church of Saint Laurent, all right, in Grenoble, and this is where the founder taught school, and this is where he would have taken the kids 2 by 2 to celebrate Mass for them there, right? And of course, kids in those days were just like kids in our day, you know. And here's a 17th century relic that's still there on the side of the wall. How's your French? Now we're going to the Grand Chartreuse. Now, the scenery here is just absolutely spectacular and magnificent. Both Blanc and Meyerbeer try to portray this as a woeful, terrible desert where St. Bruno went and all that sort of stuff. Well, baloney, you know, it's really... Now, there's the Grand Chartreuse. Right? This is, now, this is their monastery. This is the 17th century. St. Bruno wasn't there at his time. But this is what would have been there in the founder's time. This features in the film, of course, and they do not allow people to go up there anymore. There are all sort of signs saying no entry. They have a visitors, the old infirmary has been turned into a visitor center, but they don't want any tourists coming up this way. But Burkhardt says, what the hell, we'll go up there anyway. He said, I used to be friends with the abbot before he was the abbot, and he was very good. He said I could go in there any time, and he treated me nice, and he gave me chartreuse, bottles of it, and all that sort of stuff. But he said now that he's the abbot, he says he's unbearable, and he won't talk to me, and he says I can never get in there illegally. So again, we almost got arrested here because he drove all around, but he wanted me to get this, to have this views, this overview of the whole thing. Next. Now, here you can see the monks lived in these cells. Each one had a duplex, an upstairs and a downstairs. And the upstairs, you can see they're rather commodious. They're all separated from one another, so each one had a garden that he could have. These buildings were used by the abbots when they would come for a general chapter for their suite, for their entourage, their horses and their drivers and their servants and all the rest of it. So, but they themselves, were the monks who were here in the Grand Chartreuse, each one would have one of these units. Right? And they come together once or twice a week. Okay. There was a big avalanche at one time. It is true that they get snowbound. Harmony, which is right next to this, is Jared tells me that the brothers, the novices, the French novices, were snowbound in there for 10 days this past winter. One time there was a big avalanche, and they built this shrine to Our Lady, and there hasn't been an avalanche ever since. And that's supposed to be exactly 1,000 meters above sea level. Okay? And there's the entrance to the place. There's the famous scene in the movie where the Carthusian opens the door, and that's Burkhardt's cameo appearance in the film. And that's a slide of the corridor, the length of the thing, and the monk cells would be off the thing. And see here, I know those are windows, but on each monk's cell there's a door where the lay brothers will put the meal for the man 3 times a day, and then there's a table for him to have his meals. There's a prie-dieu to say his prayers, a bed to go to sleep in, and the library shelves for his books. And then underneath, each monk cultivates his own hobby. Some of them do bookbinding, some of them do sewing and tapestry work, and so on. Okay. and each has a little stove. Of course, this is where the chartreuse liquor gets its name from. They've kept the formula to themselves fairly secret, although somebody bootlegged the formula at one time, around the time of the French Revolution. But they have the copyright on this, and one or two of the monks, at least at the time I was there, were still coming here every day to supervise the operation, something like our own winery. Whether or not they've sold it to Hoyd Wine, I don't know. Now, there's Parmeny. Huh? Now, when they talk about this being way up on top of the big high mountain, well, there it is. It's about the same, it's about as big as these taller mountains surrounding the campus here. And that's coming from Grenoble towards Parmeny, and Parmeny is up on top of that hill. So it's not so terribly high. There's the total complex. Here's the chapel. There's Sister Louise just coming along. See, all these characters seem to come out just when I come along. These were originally barns that they turned into living quarters. And this is the, now of course Burckhardt put this whole thing together practically single-handed with the help of the local people called Les Amis du Parmeny. Got very little help from the French brothers who were annoyed as the deuce that Miss Joseph bought the property in the first place. And so Burckhardt got the money to build it up by renting it out to business organizations to come for commercial meetings or for wedding receptions. And in order to provide the best possible cuisine, he stole the principal chef away from the mother house. And so this is where the dining facilities are. It has since been expanded, I understand, so that they now have accommodations for many more people. And apparently now the district of Central West has taken over the whole, Central East has taken over the whole thing. And they have a novitiate for all France there. He put me up in what had been the cow barn. They have a very vicious dog here, but he kind of made friends with him. Anybody who hates dogs and children as much as I do can't be all bad, but anyhow. And see, when Burckhardt was doing this, this was the stall, this was the where they had the hay for the cows and things during the winter. But and he couldn't get this block of marble to yield it to all the granite or whatever it is, so he decided to make a bench out of it. And his bed with a little shower there, so comfortable enough. There's the chapel in Parmeny. The altar, let's go to the next one. The altar, this was originally the bottom step of the altar. So when De La Salle said Mass here, and he was chaplain here with Sister Louise for at least a 30-day period, he would have stood on that as he ascended the altar to say Mass. And so Burckhardt, when he reconstructed this place, put that together. If you look in Encounters, there's a picture of what it looked like before he got busy at it. There's Sister Louise in the back trying to whisper, telling the founder what to pray for. And Burckhardt discovered a grave underneath the floor, huh? And so he had this slab put here. He describes the day he was looking. He knew that she and one of the chaplains was buried under the floor. And so when he was doing the cleaning up operation, he went there one day and he said, all of a sudden, he said, the sun just came straight through the upper window and hit right down in this thing, and there were the bones of Sister Louise. And so he put that there. So here's where the founder gets the order to return. And he goes back by way of Lyon. That's the Lyon Cathedral, where the general councils of Lyons were held in the 14th century, 1300s. 13th century. Thomas Aquinas died in 1274 on the way to the Council of Lyon. Everywhere, if you look out the door of the cathedral, that's the present shrine to Our Lady. There was a famine in the 19th century, and everywhere in France there's a major shrine to Our Lady, almost always on top of the highest hill. And so that's the one in Lyons. So the founder, Blanc tells us, came to venerate the relic of Francis de Sales. And this was the Visitation Convent. That's all that's left of it. And that's where the Francis de Sales had his heart. The rest of them was back in Geneva. That seemed to be a big thing. They bury your heart where your heart, you leave your heart in San Francisco or someplace. And so he left his heart in Lyon. But then they have since put them all back together in one piece. He got his act together. Got his body together. But anyway, the founder would have stopped here. Okay. Maybe a trifle. This is the Church of Saint Nicholas de Chardonnay in Paris. Huh? where they had a very good educational program, as we saw even before the founder's time. This is where Roland would have stayed at one time, and the founder, towards the end of his life, as we'll see tomorrow, the founder spent several months here and wanted to die here and retire here and get away from the brothers altogether. But Bartholomew managed to get him back. That's for tomorrow. There's the death of the founder in a stained glass window in a church of St. John Baptist de La Salle in Paris. It's right near where Vaugirard used to be. It's the only church in Paris named after the founder, the only parish. There is the building, this is for tomorrow again. The brothers built this chapel to house the relics of the founder, but his relics didn't rest in peace because, of course, they were vandalized during the French Revolution. Next. This is all St. Jan. That's the back of the chapel that they built, so you have some idea of the size of it. And it's adjacent to where the old prison used to be when the brothers had it. And again, there was no entry here, but this brother got me in. There's that famous statue, we saw that already. All right, and that picture of the brother standing behind the chapel, that's where the cemetery was, where they buried all the old superiors. So when they were able to recover some of them, a lot of the early superior generals are buried here. Here's Brother Timothy, for example. And Irenaeus is here, and so they moved them to a new cemetery up on overlooking the Seine in Rouen. And this brother was showing me around. He had a lot of connections with the alumni, and they built this for the brothers, and they transplanted whatever relics they could of all of these earlier superior generals. And he said he wanted to make sure they built it big enough so there'd be room for him up here when he dies, which he may have since. But then, at the time of the beatification, the brothers in France built this enormous basilica just to house the relics of the founder. And this is the school that was opened in 1880, and it's still there, right? And in the apse of this enormous basilica, which is still a school, as you can see, that's where they had the relics. But when the brothers were expelled from France in 1904, they moved the relics to Lembec. So the founder did not really rest in peace. Huh? And then when they moved the mother house to Rome, they had to sort of sneak the relics out of France to begin with. And Rouen was screaming, "We want the relics back here, that we built this old church for them, they belong here." Superior said, "No, the founder goes with the mother house. The founder stays with the superior general." So they said, "Well, here, we'll send you a bone." So they sent him an arm or something to keep them quiet. There's the brother of the Christian schools. That's the school of St. John Baptist de La Salle in Rouen, present-day Rouen. And there's the mother house before its conversion. It's not a very good picture. They took this in 1978, I guess, but you still have the old back altar in one sort of facing, and this fresco of John Baptist de La Salle offering everybody up to the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So, well, at the time of the tercentenary, Pablo changed all that. Next. He converted the whole chapel around. So we get John Baptist de La Salle ascending into heaven instead of what had been there in the center as a mosaic, which they covered over, I guess. The American brothers, when they first unveiled this, noticed the finger of the right hand pointing towards heaven, but it was a certain amount of ambiguity as to which finger it was. And when they all started kind of tittering about it, and the superiors got wind of it, they panicked, really, and they readjusted all the lighting so it would be perfectly clear that he's pointing the index finger up. This is the present-day sanctuary. Here's where the mother house community sits around for their prayers. That's one advantage because they're all around in the circle. Now, so of course the American brothers contributed to a beautiful side chapel to where the relics of the founder were kept for years and years, as long as they were in the mother house. And the Americans paid to have a beautiful chapel decorated with stained glass windows and everything else and so on and so forth. But for the tercentenary, they decided to do what they never should have done, and they decided to put them in the sanctuary itself. This is the reliquary of the founder, with signature underneath, huh? And this with a red lamp and so on. This is the tabernacle with the Blessed Sacrament. It's supposed to be something like the burning bush or something. It's got all kind of Christmas tree lights in there. But this is gold and a red lamp and everything. And of course, any number of people go up there and genuflect before the relics because they think it's the tabernacle. And during the last general chapter, on one occasion, they had a priest in to say Mass, and sure enough, at communion time, doesn't he go over and he's trying to open the tent. So John Baptist de La Salle, at the end of his life, winds up on the shelf. What else? Next. There he is.
Ah, there he is.
Okay, let's go and have our pictures taken now. And maybe someday somebody will make a slide.